Last of Us: Escape the Dark is the third game in the Escape the Dark series, and they all share the same core gameplay. You choose a survivor and get their unique die. All survivors together work their way through a deck of chapter cards. Each round you turn over a new chapter card and try to survive whatever it brings. Most are enemy encounters. You set up combat by looking at the row of icons on the bottom of the card. You grab that many chapter dice, some you will roll, some you will place on specific sides. This is the enemy's health. You have to get rid of all these chapter dice to defeat them. How do you do that? You all roll your special survivor dice. If your result matches one of the chapter dice, it means you hit and you get to remove a matching die. If the result matches nothing, it means you missed. But enemies also fight back. At the end of every turn, if they are still alive, they hit the survivors and do as much damage as is stated on the chapter card. Unless you roll a shield, then you're blocking their counterattack and don't take damage. If you win, you get a reward, mostly new items and weapons. At the end of the deck, you meet the final boss. This is the base formula at the heart of every Escape the Dark game. Escape the Dark Castle is pretty much just this. Escape the Dark Sector adds ranged weapons and increasing difficulty to the mix. And The Last of Us: Escape the Dark promised to take it to the next level by introducing an open world. But as it turns out, this game is essentially still Escape the Dark Sector, just with a lot more hunger for table space. To describe it as open world would be a pretty wild exaggeration. Let me explain. In Escape the Dark Sector, you work your way through 3 zones consisting of a set of random cards each. You construct this in the beginning, then work your way through the increasingly difficult chapter cards before you face the final boss. In The Last of Us: Escape the Dark, you don't construct the whole deck up front. Instead, you have 5 locations you can travel to with a randomized deck each. They're arranged in 3 zones, with Zone 1 and Zone 3 offering 2 locations each. You have just enough time to work your way through 3 locations before you have to go face the final boss. Each location has a stack of 4 randomized chapter cards. So let me ask you this. How is picking 3 of 5 randomized stacks any better or more interesting than just going through a stack assembled from 3 randomized stacks? Yes, you can choose between 2 different sets at 2 points in time, but the cards themselves aren't that different in any of the locations other than flavor text that matches the location, so it doesn't matter which one you pick. For example, if you look at Lakeside versus University, Lakeside has 4 combat cards and 3 challenge cards, University has 4 combat cards, 2 challenge cards and 1 nice card with a giraffe on it. But we're not really supposed to analyze that up front, I don't think. And even if we do, we'll only draw 4 of 7 cards for each location, so how does that knowledge even help us? If we don't have any information that would let us make an informed decision about where to go, and it doesn't even matter which way we go anyway, then that's not an interesting decision to take, is it? The rewards for clearing a location also don't help us because they're random and only revealed once we actually clear the location. The actions available at the camp are random too and revealed once we arrive there. So the only thing we've got to go on are any items we might have revealed in the local stash through gain intel actions. Would I rather get this item or that item? That's all we have to go on. Does that sound like meaningful open world decision making to you? No, that's because it isn't. One change to the Escape the Dark formula is that we don't have to clear a location before we can move on. But it's not quite that simple. Yes, we can move between 2 locations in the same zone whenever we want. But we do have to get the threat tokens on a location down to 1 before we can move past it to the next zone. Because otherwise the road is blocked. The 2 locations in the first zone each start with 3 tokens on them. And the first new threat token is added at the start of round 3. So let's say we try to speedrun it. We do a chapter on day 1 and a chapter on day 2 and arrive at day 3, an outbreak day where a threat marker is added to each location. For us, it's blocking the way we just cleared. So we have to do another chapter on day 3, and now we could theoretically get a move on at the start of day 4, But we are also now 3/4 of our way through the chapter cards of that location, and it's very likely that we're in need of healing and other rewards, so usually we'd be pretty interested in finishing that last card as well. So again, not a lot of interesting decision taking going on here. The middle location, the sewers, starts out with only 2 threat tokens, but there is no way we can get to it before it gets a third one. And while we work our way through its chapters, it gets another one. And now we're almost all the way through that deck here as well, before we get the chance to move on. Again, we can only decide to skip the last card or not. And again, it's not really a choice, because usually we are in dire need of the rewards we get for clearing the location. And then the exact same thing happens one more time with the locations in Zone 3. They start out with only a single threat token on them, but by the time we can get there, they've most likely got to 4. If we hurry, we might make it there at 3 tokens. But then we've forgone rewards that we desperately need. What good is getting to the boss quickly if we just end up there with no chance of winning? Because we didn't pick up good items, skipped chances to upgrade our gear, and didn't take the time to heal along the way. Why does this game start locations with staggered token counts, when each location is just gonna be at the maximum once we get there anyway? Seems pointless. If there is no way to get there any faster, and there is no way of stopping outbreak days, why bother? Just put 4 threat tokens on everything from the start and be done with it. So, to recap, in effect we're working our way through 3 decks before we get to the boss. Exactly like in Escape the Dark Sector. And that means we could just do away with the big board and its 5 locations and instead make one single randomized deck out of 3 location decks, just like in Escape the Dark Sector. Don't get me wrong, I still like the game, but that's because I like the other Escape the Dark games, and this is pretty much exactly the same game, except for a few changes here and there. The biggest difference is that it requires way more table space, because there is all this stuff that tries to make it look like an open world, but it's all a mirage. Let me spell it out. There is no open world to be found in this game. But let's have a look at what new and different things we do get in this third Escape the Dark game. Let's walk through all 3 games real quick. In Escape the Dark Castle, you construct a deck of random chapter cards, they're all the same difficulty, and in the end you get to the final boss. Everyone picks a profession that comes with a special die. Depending on your choice, the distribution of symbols on the die is slightly different. You find melee weapons and items along the way, and you can carry 1 in each hand. Some items are two-handed. If you want one of those, you can carry nothing else. You note down your health on a piece of paper, nice and simple. Escape the Dark Sector steps it up a bit. You again construct a deck of random chapter cards, but this time you do it by combining 3 smaller decks of increasing difficulty. The game now gets harder as you progress through the deck and travel through these 3 zones within it. If you make it through, you get to the final boss. You again choose a character that comes with a unique die. Along the way you can collect items and weapons. You can carry 4 items and 1 cybernetic implant. Bigger items fill 2 slots. This time there's ranged combat, but you have to do ranged combat first. Once you enter melee, there's no going back. You need ammo dice, and there are different kinds for the different types of weapons. While you're in ranged combat, you have the option to flank your opponents. You essentially pass for 1 turn and risk 1 point of damage, but then you can attack without counter at the start of the next turn. But it pulls you into melee, so you can only do it once. Again, you note down your health on a piece of paper. This time it looks like a hospital chart. And now we arrive at The Last of Us Escape the Dark. We get location decks instead of 1 big chapter card deck, and we're driven forward by the advancing calendar. Again, a final boss awaits in the end. Again, we pick a character and get their unique die. We can collect items and weapons along the way. This time we have 6 inventory slots, but 3 of them have a dedicated purpose: melee weapon, ammo and ranged weapon. We can combine specific items to craft and upgrade weapons. This time there are no two-handed items. Each character can unlock a random special skill by fulfilling specific tasks in order. We can freely switch between melee and ranged combat, go back and forth. There's no specific dice for different types of ammunition. Some enemies allow us to do a listen and or sneak round before we enter combat. Listen gives us a way to change their chapter dice setup, and Sneak enables us to start with a surprise attack that they can't retaliate against. But both are risky. Fail Listen and the enemy gets an extra chapter dice. And if even one player fails at sneaking, then all characters who attempted sneaking take the highest amount of damage the enemy can do. This time we have a character board where we track our health. Interestingly, we have the option to withdraw from combat and re-engage later. We can even bypass combat entirely, but everyone loses 2 health points and you lose a day. I believe they added all this as a way to recover from bad luck. This game is longer than the others. You can finish Escape the Dark Castle in half an hour, so if you die after 10 minutes, you just try again. But this game takes an hour or more to play, so dying due to bad luck after 45 minutes would hurt significantly more. Conclusion. So where do we stand, The Last of Us and I? I like it, but I'm also disappointed. It's a fluffed up version of their previous game, Escape the Dark Sector. The open world is a miss. The locations don't make the game more interesting, instead they just make it a bit more long-winded and tedious to play. I like that there are subtle variations in the gameplay and that they added a few new ideas, but these are all very small changes when we were promised an open world. It's interesting to look at the images on the Kickstarter campaign page and compare how much has changed between then and the game we have in our hands now. They seem to have given up on the idea of an open world so thoroughly that if you pick up this game today and look at the back of the retail box and read through the manual, then there is no mention of an open world at all. But back on Kickstarter, this was sold to us as the next big step in the evolution of the Escape the Dark series of games. The Kickstarter video talked about how the open world aspect would be the thing to excite players the most.
I think what will excite players most is the open world aspect.
And how revealing intel and clues about the road ahead would help us strategically plot our route through the game.
They'll learn intel and clues about the road ahead, and this will help them strategically plot their route through the game.
And the game they shipped simply does not deliver on that promise at all. We haven't talked about the setting. In short, I don't really feel much of it. The art style is so similar to the previous games and bears little resemblance to the style of The Last of Us computer games and the TV series. I feel Escape the Dark, not The Last of Us. Then, as I mentioned, the core gameplay is the same as in previous Escape the Dark games. Yes, I'm playing Joel instead of Lieutenant Abbott, but they're both doing the same thing. It's a coat of paint. At no point did I think, wow, I'm in The Last of Us. No, I was clearly playing another Escape the Dark game. Maybe I'd feel it stronger if I didn't know the other Escape the Dark games so well. Okay, here comes my conclusion for real. If you're happy with a reskin of Escape the Dark Sector, then this is a good game. But if you're looking for an open world game that represents the next step in the evolution of Escape the Dark, this is not it. This pains me. The game falls short of the lofty expectations it set, delivering far less than promised. Much like in the world of The Last of Us, hope collides with harsh reality. No matter how certain it looks, no journey ever goes as planned. Every trade promises something of value, yet somehow you always walk away with less. Just like Joel and Ellie, we face the heartbreak of promises unkept and the emptiness left in their wake. I'll be damned. This game does capture the quintessential experience of The Last of Us. Thanks for listening.